So welcome to INWED Talks, an initiative of the Women's Engineering Society, celebrating International Women in Engineering Day. As WES's flagship global campaign, INWED highlights the achievements, contributions and impact of women engineers, while inspiring future generations to pursue careers in engineering. The INWED Talk series explores the INWED 25 theme of Together We Engineer through different perspectives, focusing on collaboration and innovation in the engineering sector. This session examines the transition from student to graduate as a woman in engineering, exploring some of the questions and opportunities women may have as they graduate from university and embark on a career. In conversation today, I'm delighted to welcome Sophie Malcolm, who's a civil engineer at the Queen's University of Belfast and chair of the Women's Engineering University Group's board. Welcome, Sophie.
Hello,
and Mairéad Reid, a graduate electrical project engineer at Freedom, who graduated in 2024 from the University of Glasgow with a first-class honours master's degree in electronics with music, and who's also an ambassador for the Royal Academy of Engineering Graduate Engineering Engagement Programme, or JEEP, which is an award-winning initiative by the Royal Academy that supports engineering students and recent graduates from underrepresented backgrounds as they transition into engineering careers. So let's dive in. It would be really great if you could both briefly introduce yourselves and share a little bit about yourselves. Sophie, would you like to start?
Yes, of course. So I'm Sophie, everybody. I recently graduated, actually about a year ago now, with a Master's of Civil Engineering, and then pursued a PhD in the same university in geotechnical engineering. So that is my main sort of focus at the moment, is sustainable infrastructure, looking at the longevity, and especially now with climate change becoming ever more evident in our environment. And on top of this, I'm an avid sports player, love playing hockey, gym, and obviously I'm the chair of the UGB as well, which has been an incredible experience. And it's actually my second year on the board, and it has opened so many pathways and doors for me and created new friendships across the whole of the United Kingdom. So yeah, very lucky to be a part of the INWED Talks today.
Well, so pleased to hear that. I didn't know you were sporty either, so quite excited about that. Mairéad, can you introduce yourself, please?
Of course, yeah. Hi, I'm Mairéad. So as Susan mentioned, I graduated last year from the University of Glasgow doing a joint degree between electronics and music. So that was about a year ago, same as Sophie. And then following that, I have become a graduate project engineer at Freedom, so working in sort of the high voltage infrastructure sector. I got interested in that because I was really passionate about engineering and using those tools to make the world a better place. And now I can contribute to making efficient, sustainable solutions for energy problems, which is something I'm really passionate about.
Amazing. And I think that sort of, I'm just going to pick you up on that point straight away there, Mairéad. That piece around having purpose to your engineering, I think, speaks to a lot of women when they're looking for roles. So that's really interesting to hear. Sophie, if I can come back to you, I'd just like to understand a little bit more about what motivated you to study engineering in the first place, and how has your university experience shaped where you might take your career?
So whenever I'd first looked at engineering, I was actually about 15, I believe, about to start GCSEs, and controversially, I know all engineers typically don't get on with architects, but I wanted to be an architect. And my maths GCSE, I was on track for an A star, doing very well in the class, and it was actually my GCSE maths teacher, Miss Scott, who had highlighted the open day to me at our university, and ever since it was the golden goal for me. It was the perfect sort of balance between being good at maths and getting the design element, and I just fell in love with it straight away. Obviously, as a civil engineer, you sort of get the best of three sort of disciplines with water, geotechnics, and structures. It's a very versatile degree, and then obviously eventually getting into the same university that struck the passion for me, and same with my maths teacher. I've noticed that the university environment, it definitely provides you with a great knowledge and sound understanding of engineering, I think the one thing it does really emphasize is the development and the continual thinking of, okay, what's next? What is the next step after we've finished this portion of this design? What impact has this then had? It's a very diverse degree and profession to have in any of the engineering professions, but I think coming through the university flat sort of general route, I did do a year in industry, which I will highly advise to all undergraduates. I think it was the best decision. But I think the university path definitely gives you a good sound understanding across all the disciplines and modules in which you need for your career. And it also gives you a good diverse sort of look at, you've got professionals coming in to lecture you alongside just your generic lecturers who are in research roles, and you get a good balance between the two. But I think it's something that does have to have some element of study at a university level to be able to achieve the high levels of chartership or further professional qualification.
I think that's a really interesting point there that you made there, that throughout your studying, you've had those interactions with industry, whether it be through your year in industry where you've gone out, or whether it's people coming in from industry. And so what I'm hearing is that actually your course has been really focused on real world outcomes as well as the kind of theory technical. So it's very practical, very always looking for what's coming next. So that's really interesting. And maybe we can go to you, Mairéad. Obviously the JEEP provides a number of sort of tools and techniques and opportunities to help you develop both technical and professional skills. Can you tell us a bit more about your experience of being on the Graduate Engineering Engagement Programme and how that's really supported your needs when moving into the world of work?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I did JEEP in 2020 during COVID. So and the program looked quite different back then. So at the time, it was a 3-day long sort of intensive program online with about 50 other graduate students and people in the same boat as me. And we had a variety of different workshops, from CV writing to speed networking. And I hadn't really had any internship experience or really any exposure to industry at that point. So for me, it was a good opportunity to learn more about what life looked like as an engineer outside of the lecture hall and how we can apply those skills in the real world. At that point in my degree, I hadn't really had any CV workshops or anything about employability. It's very much focused on getting the fundamentals and the theory down. So I think it was good to have that exposure sort of very early on in my career as an engineering student, because it really allowed me to sort of put those things into practice when I did internships and work experiences throughout later years in my degree.
Right.
The program is very different now. So now it's sort of a year-long structured program. And as an ambassador, it's been really interesting to see that change. I think it's gone quite a long way in the 5 years since I did it. And I think it really empowered me and supported me when I was a student, but I think it's doing even better work now.
That's so interesting. And you may not be able to answer this, but has it changed in response to sort of feedback from students on what they need?
Yeah, I think the Royal Academy of Engineering works quite closely both with students and graduates and also companies. So it's in response to sort of what students identify as what they need and any further support that they might need. But also if companies are saying our graduates aren't coming out of uni with any of these specific skills, then it will help to fill those gaps as well.
Oh, yeah, no, so good. And Sophie, what do you think? What do engineering students typically struggle with most? I mean, obviously I've heard you say, you get those good technical skills. And we heard Mairéad say that through the JEEP, they had some of that, some of the additional pieces like, CV writing, interview skills. What do you think and maybe you've had this from other sources or you haven't, but what do you think engineering students do typically struggle with the most, whether it's technical, soft skills, networking connections, or maybe it's something else?
I would say probably out of experience of, say, firsthand, especially my my university year group, every engineers are typically very good at the technical things, very, very good. And are, I would say from our experience in our university, we're coming out with sort of pristine technical abilities. I would say that probably the fall down with the university atmosphere and maybe not doing like the likes of an apprenticeship role where you've got a split between university and work, which I think is a very good way for engineers to now get qualified, is we noticed whenever we went into industry, the lack of confidence massively dropped, and it's especially to do with the university will prepare you to be able to go out and solve things, but you will not know everything, and every workplace is different for how they will analyze things and go through it. And I think having that year in industry, doing a sandwich year, massively skyrocketed everybody's confidence after that year. I think it is the communication, whether that be drawing skills, being able to have a meeting like this, good general report skills. I know engineers typically don't have a good record for good English and grammar, which I would say firsthand I would agree with from myself sometimes.
That's so funny, because when
Yeah.
I worked in engineering, I'm just going to jump in there, because
No
when
problem.
I worked in engineering, I had to quite often, I'm not an engineer, I had quite often had to translate what the engineers were telling me, and but because I've got sort of a strategy and business background, I would translate what I thought was into sort of more accessible language from what the engineers had sort of told me. But then my head of communications would say, well, I now need to translate it from what you've said, Susan, into human language. So that's quite funny. We've got like these 3 stepping stones to get from what engineers are telling us to, you know, and quite often, you'll know this, Mairéad, working in utilities, we do need to talk to the public, don't we, as engineers? So it's how do we translate those things? So that's funny that you say that, Sophie.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've jumped in and blocked your train of thought.
No.
I think that, did you have something else to add on the end there?
No, and just on, I would say the main sort of skills I'd say that we would maybe lack is probably it would generally be, I'd say, confidence. And Mairéad had mentioned about CV and interviews. We did CV writing in our first year of our degree, which I mean, it depends from university to university, but it was almost useless because we're obviously not going out for a few years and getting in industry, and we're not educated enough in first year to be able to competently go into a job and have any form of confidence. The confidence is already quite low just from coming out and not being obviously a graduate and still not knowing enough to understand everything and asking the questions. But I do feel interview skills, and there maybe needs to be a shift in the university environment from, especially in, I would say, master's sort of years. I think it should almost change to like a chartership format, and we should do competency-based interviews, because I don't think an engineer can solely be based off of black and white answers on a paper. Yes, we do need those skills, but as I said, 99% of your engineers in your university will be very technically good, can do the maths, can do all the black and white answers, but when it comes to an actual real world problem, how can they cope and how can they manage when they're questioned? Because that's something I've really noticed a shift in industry especially.
Mairéad, I don't know if you want to comment on that. Is that, would you say that's reflected in your experience, that there was this sort of lack of confidence? So confidence in being able to process the technical side of the course, but then bridging that gap between how to then apply that in the real world. There was maybe space for some more confidence building. Would you say that was reflected in your view, or maybe you didn't notice it because you were part of the Jeep? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think that's definitely something I noticed in my experience. So oftentimes students will have a lot of confidence in tackling the problems within sort of a safe setting. So within a lecture or a structured program or whatever that it is that you're doing within university. But obviously in the real world, you have a lot more uncontrolled parameters. So there's a lot more going on, and you can't really control for all of those. So students maybe don't have the same confidence because they know that they're working in an uncontrolled environment. I think students also don't have a lot of sort of corporate awareness. So little things that once you've been in your first job are kind of easy, like understanding workplace dynamics and expectations and how to write an email properly and all of this stuff that you don't really think about once you've had your first few jobs. But when you're first going into your first job, either as an intern or on placement or as a graduate, it can be kind of overwhelming because everyone is speaking a language that you don't know. I think that can really knock your confidence. I think another thing is oftentimes students, particularly from sort of underrepresented backgrounds, they'll have limited social capital, so they won't have the same sort of professional connections that maybe some other people might. And I think that's another thing that can lead to a lack of confidence, regardless of skill or ability.
I think that's right. And I mean, I'd like to sort of hope that we're not asking, it feels like the conversation so far has put a lot of pressure on the individual students to kind of do more, and on universities to release into the wild, fully formed corporate engineers. And I would like to just say, I think, you know, we should be a bit kinder to ourselves here and be content that actually when you start a job you're not fully formed, and it is the duty, you know, your employer has a duty of care to manage you through that process and understand that you're not fully au fait with, you know, corporate language. I mean, it happens throughout your life. When you move from one company to another, you find yourself in a myriad of expressions that you don't know what they are, that everyone is just, you know, taking for granted. So I think we do perhaps have, you know, maybe we need to ask a bit more of our employers to be a bit more considerate and considered about how they integrate new joiners in, especially when they're coming, it's their first job. I think we need to be a bit kinder to ourselves there. Interesting. And let's move on actually to talking about some practical support for students. And Mairéad, perhaps you can tell us what types of mentoring and other professional development have you enjoyed that has really helped you feel a bit more supported when entering into the world of work?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I think one-to-one mentoring, which you touched on, is really vital. So I've been lucky enough to have a variety of different mentors throughout my time at university and even in high school to sort of get me on the STEM career ladder, which was really great.
Who's given you that mentoring? Is that something you've set up for yourself, or?
No, when I was in school, I was part of STEMet, so I did their Student to STEMet mentoring program, which was really instrumental. I wasn't paired up with an engineer, but I was paired up with someone who allowed me to think of myself as a technical person and really gave me the confidence to push myself and go to university. And the sort of mentoring that I was given then and also in other programs since then has been really great. I think having something that Jeep does quite well is sort of structured group activities and masterclasses. So they'll have someone come in from industry or from a specific sector and sort of share real world insights. And another thing that's really good about these sessions is that they allow students to connect with their peers. So I think mentoring from someone who's a level above you, maybe with more experience or more acumen or whatever, is really useful. But I think building a really strong peer network is really important as well. Like when I was at university, I was a member of a number of different student societies, and I think those were just as useful in sort of building my confidence as any sort of more formalized program or structure was. So I think building that network is really important. And I think work experience, as we've touched on, is really important. I did loads of different internships while I was at uni, just sort of figure out what I liked, what I didn't like, what I was good at. And it really helped build my network and build my confidence as well. So I think all of those are really important.
Yeah. And how did you, I'll come on to you, Sophie, to hear your reflections on that, but how did you get your internships? Was that through the university? Did you get those?
No, I think most of them was just sort of emailing and sending out lots of CVs and
yeah, I
just
mean, really, yeah, I mean, I think it's a bit like the schoolwork experience, isn't it? And I've always been quite cross about schoolwork experience because it seems to me that it's highly dependent on who your parents are friends with.
Yes,
which
definitely
brings in enormous problems for me. So maybe we'll come back to that, but I think that's a really good point to make, that it feels wrong that I'm not saying that, you know, we shouldn't, you know, people who've got that at their fingertips shouldn't use it, but it does feel like, to me, it's not a fair system. And there's maybe something more that could be done there for that. So that's interesting. So Sophie, perhaps we can come back to you and you can tell us a little bit about your experience of mentorship or networking, maybe the work you've done with the Women's Engineering Society and how that might have made a difference to how ready you feel for work.
Yeah, so probably directly in university, I wouldn't say there was a direct mentorship sort of available. We always, whenever we went into first year, we were assigned a lecturer, and there was a group of students per lecturer. And I got on quite well with my mentor, and he was very good and helped me the whole way through university, and had quite a good bit of rapport back and forth over the years, and helped me actually get into a geotechnical PhD, which was interesting and a complete change from the initial idea of what I wanted to do. But I would say in university, I would say my mentorship probably came from friendships I made from being president of the Engineering Society and then being co-president the year prior to that. And actually getting to know older students who were in the same course and their advice and things of what to do, what not to do, exam technique, all that sort of stuff. And it made a huge difference. And especially after the year in industry and getting to know different people, I think that the confidence came for that year in industry, which then led to improving networking, getting to know a broader range of people, which then in turn helped my confidence, improved my grades at the end of the year. And I got to walk across the stage with my degree. But I would say university's definitely, for me anyway, my personal experience was more casual, and the mentorship indirectly, maybe at the time not noticing, came from friendships that were formed through confidence building after a sandwich year. Amazing. And different networking like that. Yeah,
I think that's another good point you raise. In that, I think those industry years are great, but it does, you know, when you've made those friendship groups at university outside of your course, it is quite a thing to then come back and reintegrate into university, isn't it? So it's amazing, but it's also quite tricky, I think. Mm-hmm. And I wonder, and I'll open this out to both of you, how did you, what did you find most useful to reintegrating? I mean, Sophie, you sort of touched on it there, around the fact that you had this broader network of engineering students in different years, so that was quite helpful. Is there anything else that you think, like thinking about transitioning back into uni, that was super useful, that you'd sort of give as a piece of advice to people who are just about to come back to re-entry into university?
I would say probably from my experience, you know, from that newfound confidence you've got in industry, and I know not every student will be the same, but if you've had the confidence to speak up in a workplace that you've had your input in, university is nothing compared to that in terms of being able to speak up. If you've been able to speak up in a workplace environment in the profession you're going into, as soon as you come back, get involved with everything, and your friends will still be your friends from before you left, and maybe if you did fall out of touch, they'll be back, you'll be back, and it'll be back to a normal system. But that's what I found. I got involved with far more societies when I returned from my year in industry. Yeah, massively. So that after that year in industry, during my dissertation year, I became co-chair of the Engineering Society, and then the following year, master's year, became president. And it was that confidence of being able to step up and say, no, I actually can manage these different things, and I'm good with people on a team, and I'm quite a team player, partly a leader here and there when I need to be, but I'll always stay involved with everybody. But that was my major thing. I had a nice confidence boost after that year in industry. I felt confident in my abilities, and I came back and just thought, this is the year to change. I want to get involved. Let's go. Yeah.
So good, so good. And Mairéad, does any of that resonate with you, what Sophie's just said there?
Yeah, I can definitely echo all of those points. I mean, I think for me, it's slightly different because I was never away for as long as a full year, and most of the sort of internships were either over a summer, so kind of everyone had splintered off to their own places, or I had a 6-month placement in my master's year, but everyone was off doing placements at the same time.
Yes.
So we were all off together rather than taking a year out and maybe joining a different cohort
Yeah.
when I came back. But I think just making an effort to really network and join every club and society. I think once you join the working world, you realise that it's a lot harder to make friends out there than it is at university. So I think
you never get that chance again to do so many different things. I really echo that. Yeah, no.
It really galvanizes you to make the most of all the opportunities when you get back to uni. But yeah, I think knowing that you've done a few years of uni before and those went okay, presumably, so you know how to do uni. It just sort of need to get used to it again. But yeah,
so good. Well, I'm really excited to see what you're both going to do next. I'm going to ask you what are your ambitions? What have you got your sights set on? And it can be, I'm not going to limit you here. You can tell me about something where you'd like to get to in next year or 5 years or 10 years, or just, you know, in the ether. But have you got something in your mind that you'd really like to achieve in your career? Maybe Mairéad, you can start.
Yeah, that's a big question. I think so I'm on a structured 2-year grad scheme right now. So my next sort of goal is finishing that grad scheme. It's a rotational grad scheme, so I'm gonna get to experience a lot of different parts of the business and work in different teams on different projects. So that should give me a broader understanding of my company and the industry. So trying to make the most of that opportunity is my first goal. I think ultimately I might work towards chartership, but that's probably a few years away. So that might be my next stretch goal. But ultimately, I mean, I became an engineer because I want to make positive change to society. I liked maths and physics, but I wanted to do something that was tangible. So I'm hoping by the end of my career, I'll have helped to make some tangible, positive change.
Amazing to hear. Sophie, what about you?
I'm very similar to Mairéad, actually. Once I finish up, I'm hoping to work, well, continuously aiming to work towards chartership. So that's probably in another 4 to 6 years. Obviously, it takes a bit of time, but I've been actively involved in the Institute of Civil Engineers as well, doing different roles for them, and I'd love to progress in some of their roles whenever I get out into industry full time. It's something I'm passionate about, and I love staying in touch with the likes of WES and the ICE and having involvement with the societies. I think it's a massive area, I think, that a lot of engineers don't utilise, or the societies sitting online at their doorstep, wherever it may be. I think it's a massive confidence boost, and it's something that I want to stay involved with for the rest of my career and beyond that, hopefully. And never know, maybe in a couple of years' time I'll be able to have something achieved and it'll be published on the IC or through WES and have some positive contribution to engineering for women as a whole. That would be incredible.
Legacy. I love that. Well, we're incredibly grateful to both of you for your involvement at the Women's Engineering Society. So let me reiterate my thanks to you both for volunteering, taking part and leading those teams as you do. We are incredibly grateful. So I'm going to draw it to a close. Thank you both so much for giving up your time today and for showcasing the things that really worked for you and how you've kind of got to where you are as successful young women embarking on your careers. I just want to pick up a couple of things that this year Women's Engineering Society is really excited to bring unlimited fee-free membership to women studying engineering at our partner organisations. And we're also really excited for our student conference later in the year, which will focus on helping women in engineering secure summer, year in industry placements and graduate jobs. So we're looking forward to that later in the year. But thank you so much both. It's been really lovely to bring you together and to speak to you today. And I wish you all the very best in what comes next for you both.